Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 21st of August 2013. Welcome along for another weekly AVForums podcast. I'm Phil Hinton, editor of AVForums, and joining me for this edition are AVForums assistant editor Steve Withers.
This stuff will make you a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus, just like me.
Games editor Mark Botwright.
I'm scared, Poncho.
Audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Get to the chopper!
It's Da Chopper, not the Chopper. You've ruined it.
No, it's not.
Is it not?
No, do you know what? I actually watched that segment just to make sure. The T-shirts and all the stickers and all the rest of it have changed it to Dear, and obviously the well-known band Austrian Death Machine have changed it to Get to Da Chopper as well. But it's the, and it's the in the script, and it's the in the film.
My God, I'm denigrating Arnie's acting skills here.
I'm impressed with your dedication.
Yeah,
there.
I was just going to say, brilliant research there, Ed. You actually went and watched the film. Yeah.
No, I watched that
from memory.
Momentary segment just to check it.
Right, so let's crack on with some hardware news first of all. And guess what? We're going to talk 4K.
Yeah.
Right, so some
Tumbleweed noise.
Yeah, tumbleweed noise. Hold back the excitement, Ed. Right, so first of all, plans for a 4K satellite broadcast system. This is news that KT Skylife in South Korea did a trial on Friday at the time of this recording. We're recording this on Monday. And they used the new high-efficiency video codec, HVEC or HVEC, or however you want to pronounce it. And it seems to have gone well. There didn't seem to be any third parties giving any kind of feedback on how well this trial went, but they said it's working and it's going to open up to subscribers next year as a pilot, and then full commercial system by 2015. And I guess with the prices of TVs falling, and we're going to come to this in a minute, there might be a user base for this come 2015.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. It's not really a major surprise. I think quite a few satellite broadcasters have been testing 4K broadcasting. I know Sky have, a couple of the European ones and some of the US ones. So, it's certainly technically feasible, as they've shown. With the new codec, no problem at all. They've got the bandwidth. It's just a question of having the installed, user base, and obviously content. Content is king, I suppose.
Yeah, on the subject of content, do we know? Obviously, it's very early days. We don't know much about it, but this sort of reminds me, in its own way. Do you remember years and years ago when HDTV started making their way into dealerships, and basically all we could show them at that point was the sort of Astra demo feed, which basically appeared to just show lots of fat German men in market squares, or maybe my memory's a bit selective at that point, but it was gorgeous, but it wasn't exactly what you'd call gripping plot-driven entertainment. So
it was gorgeous fat German men. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know that. I mean, obviously we all have our crosses to bear, Phil. But it was a lovely feed. It was a really nice demonstration of 1080, but there was nothing. There was no actual content. Yeah. It was just a sort of rolling demo, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of chicken and egg, isn't it? Really, you want the content. People aren't going to buy the TVs unless there's content, but there's no incentive to create the content unless there's a TV, user base installed. So someone's going to have to make the first move.
Oh no, I completely agree. I think this is absolutely vital, and I don't want to denigrate it, but I'm, just as in a sort of sense of trying to get a handle on what we'd like to see is it as much a sort of exercise in testing the hardware and basically letting a wider audience know that 4K exists in stores, or are they seeking you and I to put our money where our mouths are and actually subscribe to this sort of thing, obviously when it leaves South Korea, if it leaves South Korea?
Well, Sky are running their demonstrations. They haven't gone public with it just yet. I think they're still trying to back up the 3D mistake that they made. So they're kind of sticking with 3D for the time being and not really giving much away in terms of 4K. Sony did Wimbledon as a trial. Sony definitely getting their cameras out there at the right price points for professional users to start using them. Even our very own Steve Hill shot 4K for one of his projects a few weeks back. So, the technology's there, the equipment's there to do it. It's just a case of who's going to make the first move. And
well, it looks like Netflix are gearing up for 4K delivery. You've got a number of satellite providers. You've got Red producing downloads for the Red Ray player. Admittedly, that's only in the US. And Sony, of course, again, only in the US, are providing a download service. So it seems as though there is probably more content in the pipeline than perhaps we're giving it credit for. But in the US, at least.
Well, I mean, you got 100 years of content.
Well,
if you're talking about 35mm film and transferring that across. But this is another big stumbling block. Will the studios get behind it? Sony studios will, because they're owned by Sony, and they've got TVs to sell, so they will do it. But will the rest of Hollywood get on board? I mean, remember back to Blu-ray and HD DVD and the fighting and the wrangling that was going on over copy protection and so on. That's another big hot potato that we need to get out of the way before this is going to become mainstream. And I'm surprised that hasn't really been breaking news so far in this whole thing. I fear that's yet to come.
If we don't hear something about this at CES, we're in trouble, I think. If they don't announce some kind of studio support for 4K at CES, and ideally some kind of 4K delivery system in like possibly a 4K Blu-ray, then I don't know. I can't really see it being a success, because where's the incentive to buy it then?
And this is a problem that obviously Sony, LG and Samsung are having at the moment with their 4K TVs. They're just too bloody expensive. But we spoke about this last week, guys, where LG brought their prices down to match Sony and Samsung. And a day after LG did that, and we discussed it on the podcast, it was breaking news at the time, Sony turned around and knocked another $1,000 off their TVs to make them even cheaper. So if, in terms of consumers, this has to be a good thing, but with some caveats.
Definitely for the consumer, it's good news. I mean, I thought they were pretty cheap at $4,000 for a 55-inch, or less than $4,000 for a 55-inch 4K TV, and now we're looking at nearer $3,000, and then that's the same kind of ballpark price you would pay for a 55, 60-inch flagship 1080p TV. So prices have dropped significantly faster than I ever thought they would. It's quite surprised me, actually. I guess that means that either Sony is just very aggressive about pushing 4K, or they haven't sold very many TVs yet.
And Mark, Sony could play a blinder here, couldn't they? We're going to come on to the PS4 a little bit later. We're going to get more details about it tomorrow at the time of this podcast recording. But they could play a blinder with this, with the new PS4. It's not something they've really discussed at the minute, but it could be a 4K platform.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's very much in the air, as with everything else with regards 4K. I don't think at the moment anyone's really placing any emphasis on it, or even really looking at it expectantly. But I think long run, in 6-12 months' time, we'd expect to have something concrete about how they plan to deliver it. And
of course, that comes back to Netflix, which we did see, Steve, at CES last year. They actually had a 4K demo running. You're then looking at them, you're then looking at other providers like that. It could happen quite quickly. If one of them jumps, I suspect the rest will have to follow, basically.
Yeah, well, I think if someone like Netflix were to start doing 4K, streaming, that would be a game changer, really. I mean, Netflix are becoming more and more significant in that marketplace in the last 2 years. I mean, their subscriber base is now, I think, something over 30 million. So it's really getting quite large. And they're producing their own content, and if they start moving into 4K delivery, then you start thinking, well, yes, I think other people will immediately start to follow them, particularly if it's successful, and they've got the kind of weight behind it to really push it. So I'd be very curious to see exactly what Netflix do over the next sort of 6 months to a year.
4K.
There's only so much you can say about these facts.
We don't know anything about it. It could all fizzle out.
It won't fizzle out, believe me.
Once
the consumer electronics companies get their mind set on something and they start spending money on it, you're going to get it.
Fizzle out, but there are numerous hurdles in their way, and if it's not orchestrated well, it could end up, should we say, not being quite the massive, snowball effect they want it to be.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And you just have to look back to how it was done properly with DVD. Everybody singing from the same song sheet, and then look at HD DVD, Blu-ray, just to see how.
Just any other format, to be honest, Phil.
Well, yeah. I was just thinking right. That. Yeah, you got mini disc, and
the one thing though that I do wonder about with regards to things like how it was with DVD, which was, if you remember back then, there were so fewer. There were a lot. There didn't seem to be as many online retailers that people were willing to go to buy something as large as, say, a television. So you had far more things like Sony centers and Panasonic centers, and every single one had a TV set up, their best TV set up with a DVD player, playing some kind of Pixar film or something like that. And that was how most people, it seemed, certainly the masses, actually got to know what it looked like and were massively impressed by that. But you just wonder whether the same thing will be true now with the the kind of retail sector shrinking, the amount of specialist stores slowly dwindling as well.
Yeah.
Whether people will actually get to be able to see 4K. It's a bit like with Sky trying to advertise HD on TV with a picture, and they're advertising it through an SD channel.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good point, and one of the big hurdles that they have to get across. Go back to when DVD came about. The internet didn't really exist. You're talking 97 DVD came out, so there was very little internet use.
I was still ordering from play.com over the phone.
Yeah.
Asking most places to send me a price list and that kind of thing.
I was still buying Laserdisc because I was like, DVD, I'm not interested in that. Laserdisc, the way to go.
Yeah, that's what I said right to the point where I actually saw one of them.
Yeah,
an anamorphic DVD on a widescreen TV, and then within seconds of that, I realised this was going to cost me a fortune.
As it always does.
But Mark makes a excellent point, Phil, because there aren't places where people can see this stuff, unfortunately, or there are fewer places than there used to be. And at least, though, I suppose with 4K, you can set it up and make, and the difference can be apparent to the consumer. I think one of the big problems that 3D had was, and we can testify to this, can't we, is that they were always really badly set up in the stores that were available. People would look at them and think, oh, that looks rubbish, and not be interested.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, if Sky really, really suddenly want to make their 4K service known to people, they'll cut a deal with Wetherspoons or whoever. They'll park it in every skanky pub in the land, and all of a sudden that they'll start to get the message across. Considering they tried doing that with 3D, which, as you say, is a difficult sell enough when you're trying to do it to sort of 3 or 4 people, let alone a pub full of them. There's precedent for them doing it before, and to my mind, it's an easier sell to do. So they just need to get their act together and essentially subsidise it into a couple of pub chains, and I reckon that would do a lot of the donkey work.
But just
especially without having to wear glasses.
But just the skanky ones, you said, Ed.
Only the skanky ones. I don't know about you, but my nice pub doesn't have any tellies in it at all.
Well, you said Wetherspoons there, but do Wetherspoons have TVs? They certainly don't have music.
No, they don't have music. They do have TVs. At least both of them in Milton Keynes do.
I don't know.
I mean, they are all similarly pits of despair, but they have.
Do they have customers?
They've got people that prop up various work surfaces. Yeah. I'm not a fan of Wetherspoons. I'm sorry if that's rebellious. I just don't like the place.
Other bars are available, of course.
Other bars are available.
I can't remember the last time I was in a bar. I can't remember the last time I left the house.
Well, we've had.
Are you wearing a pair of tissue boxes on your feet and bottling your own urine, Howard?
Not quite. It's getting there, though.
Probably just to plug the fact that we will be getting the new Samsung 4K TV in for review.
Samsung. Not Samsung. Not Samsung. Samsung and Delia.
Samsung.
It's Samsung.
Samsung. Yeah, that's not what you said. You said Samsung.
Samsung.
Say THX.
Thanks. That arrives on the day this podcast goes up. So look out for a review of that quite soon.
Yeah, cool. So that's how many we've done now? That's 4 4K displays we've looked at?
Yeah, we've done an LG, a Sony, a Samsung, and, 2 Sony actually, sorry, because we did the projector as well.
Certainly moving in the right direction. I have no doubt when IFA comes around, we're going to get bombarded with it again. Talking about high resolution audio. This is something, Ed, which has never managed to penetrate the market.
Well, if you're a nutter like me, you do have a small but noticeable collection of the stuff. But you're absolutely right. As in terms of its market penetration to sort of the rest of the world, sane people, it's been very limited. And part of the problem has been, excuse my French, the choices of music have been shite. effectively, the world does not need yet another copy of Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. It arguably didn't need Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits in the first place. So essentially, it's been a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's music that it's dad rock that only a certain group of people will buy. It doesn't do very well. People don't feel compelled to put the effort in. Great news. I say great news. It's certainly news. A French site with the curiously hard to pronounce name of Qobuz, Qobuz. They've been around for some years now, but until recently, if you tried to buy in the UK, it politely but firmly in French told you to poke off. More recently, they've now started selling much, admittedly not all, but much of their catalogue is now available to UK customers. And it includes stuff that people have actually heard of, which is quite exciting. New Daft Punk album, Random Access Memories, is on there. I was just checking through before the podcast started. There's new album by The White Lies.
The Rolling Stones live in Hyde Park.
Absolutely. There's stuff that is A, new, B, being played on commercial radio, and C, we can discuss this in a moment, but from my perspective, it's priced semi-realistically. There's we can discuss that there's clearly some way to go where you're paying less for the physical CD or something than you are for the virtual download, but they are making an effort. I've bought a couple of things off the site to experiment with it. The download manager, admittedly, it's all still in French, so you need to think back to your GCSE under these circumstances. But it's all pretty easy to follow. Their service is extremely good, and the downloaders work fantastically as well. Buying from them is painless, and you get instant gratification. Well, as soon as you've downloaded it anyway, so on a reasonably fast line, you've got the album instantly ready to go. And it comes down to, this is, someone's been putting in a fair amount of effort, and I'm fascinated to see whether it's actually going to be warranted, sort of be rewarded with any sort of sales response.
You see, my problem with this, Ed, is if they go more commercial, the problem is that more commercial mastering is it's not going to sound any different in high res because they're mastering to certain frequencies and almost capping it. So it sounds good on the radio, it sounds good on an MP3 and so on. This is something that's been happening over the years, and more studio masters are not what you would call studio masters, full range studio masters.
This is where it gets slightly complex, because a number of albums now are being recorded. Their actual original master is not clipped or recorded at 11 out of 10. There are two reasons for this. One, certain bands are sort of semi-aware of there being the possibility to sell a higher quality copy to somebody, and the other one is ironically because the albums are still being released on vinyl, and if you try and cut the vinyl on in the sort of edited for radio method, the needle will physically jump out of the groove of the record. So there is generally, for a lot of new albums, an uncompressed version in existence, and that is largely where these high-res masters are coming from. Classic case in point was the last Muse album, Second Law, which, like all the other Muse albums, if you bought the CD version, was, well, pretty gopping. Everything was right up at the top. If you looked at the actual trace of it, it was just a big white noise. But the high-res master and the vinyl came from an unclipped example with dynamic range, and they genuinely sound better. I mean, it's complex whether they sound better because they've simply put the effort in recording it rather than because it's high res, but the end result is that you get a version of the album which doesn't sound like a bag of spanners when you play it on speakers larger than a coffee mug.
I've got to say, as someone who always looks out for quality, this has passed me by so far. The whole music thing, I've kind of taken a back seat personally in terms of music collection. I used to go out and buy loads of CDs every month and loads of DVDs and Blu-rays, and I've got to say, over the past couple of years, I don't know if it's because of the work that I do or not, but really lost interest in terms of collecting music and collecting films. There's only the odd Blu-ray I'll go out and buy nowadays, and everything else I'm catching up on TV or catching up on Netflix and so on. And when it comes to music, if I want music in the background, I've got Spotify playing.
Well, I don't disagree with that, and I don't think that that's going to be a particularly unusual state of being for people listening to the podcast. But where it strikes me as interesting is that people are, we know from the data that people are buying a shed load of MP3 albums on iTunes and an almost as large a shed load in certain circumstances on Amazon. And it comes down to whether there is a sweet spot in terms of internet speed, in terms of the ability to play the files, all sorts of slightly complex calculations as to whether there's a point where people go, well, hell, it costs X for the MP3 and X plus £2 for a file 10 times the size and quite a lot better. I'll go for that. It comes down to I'm a realist. This whole argument that the public has suddenly stopped being interested in quality isn't true. A large proportion of people have never given two hoots about it. It's simply that CD was also the most convenient as well as the best resolution format available. People weren't buying it, they weren't buying Wham albums on CD because they felt that was the best way to hear George Michael. It was just that was the most convenient way of doing it. And I'm just wondering really whether downloads are sort of converging. My broadband is now at a point where I can download these sort of 500-600 meg FLAC downloads, and it takes 7-8 minutes, if that. And that's no time at all. It's certainly a damn sight quicker.
Lucky.
Well,
bastard.
I know you live in Dungy on the Wold or whatever. That's your issue, not mine. Broadband speeds are however slowly they are going up, and it feeds into all sorts of other requirements we have for fast broadband. But ultimately, there's no compelling reason anymore that you have to buy compressed audio. And if the pricing is good enough, whether people would start buying bigger files.
I don't buy compressed audio, Ed. I buy CDs.
Well, yes, I know, but with respect, you're not.
Which,
you're not
as
exactly
you pointed out, are
are
generally
you?
cheaper than the MP3 downloads.
Well, there is that as well, and you get a physical backup as well,
Yeah,
and all
exactly.
sorts of other considerations. But
The booklet and all that sort of
I hate CDs. I always have done. It's never been a sound thing. I just find them horrible, plasticky things where I break the boxes without paying attention to it, and it just I
What
find
have
it
you got,
tremendous.
like Hulk hands or something?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, obviously, we discovered.
Smash, not another one.
We discovered from last week that obviously, as I don't find my iPad to be a burden, that obviously I may have upper body strength I didn't know I had. But no, I've always hated them, and that being able to instantly get the album in CD quality, I'll sort my own backups. I'm loving it. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
But you don't get any kind of artwork and that kind of thing.
Well, now it varies. I mean, obviously, from an artwork perspective, I still buy vinyl. So if I want big pictures and lyrics I can read without a magnifying glass, that's my go-to location. But a lot of the downloads that I've purchased over the last month, sort of 6 months or so, they've come with multiple cover art bits. They've got inlay sleeves. They've got notes, release details. They come with a lot of data, which I can actually read again without squinting at a tiny paper booklet in a little plastic case.
Right, let's move on. Let's wrap up on hardware. You already let the cat out the bag regarding the Samsung 4K TV, so that is coming up for review this week. And what else is coming up, Steve?
Mark is going to be reviewing a Roku streaming box, which is very interesting because he's just recently done the Now box, which is obviously built by Roku because it was identical looking. And I reviewed the Apple TV box last year, I think it was. And I think we'll be talking again about Roku a bit later on and Apple TV in the tech section. But yeah, he's going to be looking at that, which apparently, certainly from talking to him initially before he popped on holiday, which is why he's not on this podcast, sounds quite interesting. It sounds like, it could be a really useful little device for not just streaming content from things like iPlayer, but also using things like Plex for streaming content from elsewhere in your network. So could be interesting, that.
I've got something cool as well, it must be said. Obviously, I can't compete with the majesty of another 4K television, but we've got it arrived over the weekend. It is a product from one of the oldest names in American hi-fi, Macintosh, a brand so old that another sort of company that uses the word Macintosh, even they didn't tangle with them on it in a legal sense. And it's the Macintosh D100. It's essentially a DAC, but it's a digital preamp as well. So it has a full set of volume controls, variable outputs. It looks like other pieces of Macintosh equipment, which best described as gothic. That'll make more sense when you see the pictures of it. Early days at the moment, and I'm not going to lie, it's £3,000. But obviously, after the Datasat review, we're living the high life. It is absolutely fabulous, and if you've got 10 minutes, you'll want to read the review, because even though I have absolutely no need for it in my system, I'm still coveting it. It's a lovely, lovely thing, and the review will be up before the end of the week.
Moving on, and let's go to games news. The Games podcast was out last week. If you haven't had a listen yet, go and download it. But things tend to move on once a podcast is recorded. Usually a couple of hours after a podcast is recorded, things change. So there are quite a few things that have come out in the last week, Mark, to go through. First of all, the Xbox One, it will work without the Kinect.
Yes, it was one of those things that people wondered about, but as soon as they lost various different bits of functionality, that it was always likely to happen. But it was quite a surprise, simply because people had assumed that it was going to be integrated at a system level, that it would be always on, and then when they decided that you could turn it off, then there was a question about, well, why is it even plugged in anymore? Would it still be listening for you to be able to turn it on again without having to go into the settings? And they said no, so it wouldn't be listening. So for all intents and purposes, they basically said that it would be unpluggable. But now, yes, you can in fact just leave it in the box. So it's now looking like, a bit of a dead peripheral, and it's surely going to have ramifications for games development, because once you assume that a certain amount of people aren't going to be taking it out of the box, a certain amount of people don't even want to use it from day one, and they're not even going to be forced to try it, so they would at least get the chance to be persuaded to keep it there, then it's just got to be a matter of time before you see some kind of another bundle come out. 6 months or a year, I wouldn't be surprised to see a version of the Xbox One £50 cheaper and without the Kinect.
The one thing I'm getting from this story as it develops over the months, do Microsoft have a clue what they're doing?
No.
Is this the worst launch in the history of the world? Because it seems like they've been doing one U-turn after another.
You can tell they're not a consumer electronics company. That is abundantly clear. They've made every gaffe in the book going forward here.
I mean, Sony have wiped the floor with them in terms of their launch of the PS4, haven't they? I mean, it's been absolutely slick from beginning to end. They haven't put a foot wrong. They've catered to the gaming community in a way they didn't with the PS3, whereas Microsoft just seem to be putting their foot in it at every opportunity.
See, I don't even think that Sony have done that much slick. I think if you look at what Sony have done, what they've basically said is they've paid further lip service, similar to what Microsoft did about talking about multimedia. I mean, they had a whole segment at E3 saying about how they were going to join up, with Sony Pictures and this, that, and the other, and going to deliver all of this new media to you in exciting ways. And basically, that doesn't mean anything. Those are all words. You haven't actually shown us how it's going to work. And they've stuck online multiplayer behind a paywall now. But yet, even that kind of slides away simply because Microsoft don't seem to have hired anyone with a PR brain. I mean, sending anyone out to talk about a product before you even know what its features are, or whether you're going to be charging your customers to use secondhand games or anything, just seems like absolute suicide. And it's almost like they'd got to this point where they were accepted as a legitimate gaming company, where the Xbox One, people were still, they were suspicious of them. The Xbox 360 gained somewhat close to parity with the PS3, depending on what sales figures you believe, but they were, very much slugging it out with them, certainly in America. And it's almost like they believed that they were kind of on that road to becoming, an Apple or someone like that. That they, people would see the slick presentation and say, no, I believe these guys. Whereas deep down underneath, everyone still thinks, I don't trust them. And they just kind of shot themselves in the foot. It's that sad fact of a company that kind of almost can't shake off its corporate image. A guy walks out onto a stage and shows you something, and it's got an Apple logo on it. No one questions about, well, who owns what's on it? No one really starts asking those questions. People look at the design. Microsoft sent out, they released this ridiculous design statement about how everything was designed in the Xbox One package with a 16:9 ratio. The camera and everything is tied together, and even the box looks. And you just think, who hired these people?
Who cares?
Yeah.
I think it's a valid point, Mark, that Sony probably haven't been that slick or cool. They just haven't been Microsoft at this point.
Yeah, it was the classic.
Just sit back and do nothing and let Microsoft cock everything up.
If you're worried about your weight, stand next to someone who's fatter than you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what they've done.
That's why I like Vegas.
By the same token, we're going to see what Sony are doing with regards to release date. Gamescom, they're going to be announcing this tomorrow, which will be yesterday if you're listening to this on Wednesday. So we should see exactly when the PS4 will be hitting shelves. The Toys R Us kind of very much dodgy date slated in for December the 13th. I still think that's looking like it'll be a little bit late. I'm still of the...
I think the rumour now is 21st of October, apparently, which is...
I know, that was what I was saying, last month about the whole pre-order thing. Was it just because they'd had a huge amount of pre-orders, or are they looking to release a little bit earlier? I mean, it does kind of tie in with the fact that I think the PS2 was released in October. I think that was about 21st or 26th in the US. And so they are... with design, they've kind of tied the PS4 to the PS2. It's kind of that idea of going back to the heyday, the high point of everything. So, it would be a fairly safe bet, I'd say.
If somebody asked me which one, I had a choice on one of these, I'd be going with PS4. Just because, of, all the uncertainty about the Xbox One. I mean, does anybody actually know what the specs are? They did an unboxing, did they not, Mark? And that threw up even more questions than it did answers.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is that, again, it's back to that idea of Microsoft are just really bad at trying to throw this subterfuge and try and distract people. I mean, during the unveiling, at the unveiling or at E3, where they said it had however many billion transistors, and it's a completely pointless stat. It means absolutely nothing to anyone, because they're clearly, when someone tries to cover up the specs, they're usually on the kind of losing end of any battle there. But ultimately, we're still going to see the vast majority of games released multi-platform, so it doesn't really make that much difference.
Ed, you've been very quiet.
Well, I mean, as you know, Phil, I looked at both of those consoles in depth and then just bought a Pram instead. But by origin, I've only ever owned I never owned an Xbox 360. I only ever owned the original one. I've had all of the PlayStations. So simply in terms of unthinking brand loyalty, I naturally sway towards the PS4. But I don't know. The whole massively online multiplayer business has apparently passed me by completely. I'm in no rush to buy either, but if I suddenly found myself looking at it, I'd probably end up going for the PlayStation. Is my gut reaction on that. I don't think either of them are particularly great looking, but I think the PlayStation is a marginally more aesthetically pleasing piece of kit as well.
The way things are going, I really wish I'd ordered both of them on day one rather than just the PS4, because then I could flog the Xbox One and use the money from that on eBay to pay for the PS4. The way things are looking, in terms of Microsoft now announcing not going to release in certain European countries before the end of the year. Clearly, both manufacturers might have issues with supply.
Well, if there's one thing we've learned across all of these consoles, going back to certainly the PS2 and probably earlier than that, is that if you buy one of these consoles from the first 6 months of production, you are mental. I don't mean to be derogatory to people with actual mental health issues, but it's the same thing. You are profoundly wrong in the head, because they will go wrong. I mean, those early PS3s, I've made sandwiches with greater longevity than some of those, and the Xbox 360 has hardly been a paragon of reliability either, and the early ones were catastrophic.
I've got an early US one, PS3, sitting under the TV. It's never been switched on in 5 years.
Those are actually they were massively overspec machines.
Oh no, the surviving ones are worth quite a lot of money. The SACD capable ones with the 4 USB ports and the backwards compatibility, they still fetch quite strong money if you haven't find a working one.
I've got 2 of them, and neither of them, the Blu-ray drive has gone in both.
Right.
And I think also they removed the SACD compatibility as well.
they did.
So,
Yes.
that was
Well, that's because some Brightspark figured out a way to actually rip DSD off SACDs using them.
oh, that's who I get to blame then.
It's supposed to be impossible.
They also had a PS2 built into it, didn't they, originally? And that was removed as well.
Yeah, they were backwards compatible.
But I think out of them, as a home cinema fan, not as a gamer, I think the PS4 just it seems to offer just a little bit more, and the potential is there for it.
The only thing I would
there might be some 4K going on in there somewhere.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that I wouldn't put it past Microsoft to spend significant money trying to push the whole multimedia angle. I wouldn't be surprised if they tie up a lot of exclusive deals. You know, we've seen kind of what happens with Netflix and the like, and you know, various different providers. I certainly wouldn't be surprised. They want people in that interface. They want people kind of consuming through their front end. And the fact is that Sony have marketed theirs as a games machine. Oh, and it also does these other things. Microsoft set their stall out from day one saying, we want you to listen to music to this. We want to be able to recommend you, you know, what album you download through us, you know, what movie you rent through us. And so they've got to be tying up some kind of exclusive deals.
Well, we were going to talk about it in the movie section, but I guess this is a good time as any to talk about the fact that Microsoft have announced they're going to be financing a remake of Blake 7. Which, so you're dead right. I mean, okay, maybe I'm quite excited about that because I was a fan of Blake 7. It's a strange thing to love remake, I admit, but Mark's point is spot on, which is they are obviously planning to create exclusive content in order to help push their platform.
I just think Blake 7 is amazing simply because every single part of it says this program was made on a budget of £11. That's one of the reasons it's as brilliant as it is. Unless Microsoft commit to saying, well, we're only going to do it using special effects we learned on Blue Peter, it's not going to be the same program, is it?
Yeah, it would be brilliant if they did that, though.
I think it would be fabulous.
They could at least have
good money to watch it.
Cardboard sets.
They could at least have Blake in it, though. That would be a good start. Because I think for 2 out of the 4 seasons, he wasn't even in the show.
Yeah, I imagine Serverland's getting on a bit these days and all.
With a short haircut, though, was kind of quite saucy, stern but saucy in a strange way. But yes, you are absolutely right, Mark. It would seem that's exactly what they're planning on doing.
Well, is there not the Halo thing with Steven Spielberg already?
Yeah, they've been talking about a Halo film for years. It never happened. Peter Jackson was going to do it at one point.
Yeah, but at the launch they said they were going to do a TV series.
There is a TV movie, isn't there? It's on Netflix, actually. A Halo TV movie.
Yeah, they're going to do the TV series, and it's, you know, linking in. It's a nice name to throw in, Steven Spielberg, but no one really knows exactly how much of an input he's going to have. But again, it comes back to that idea of now that both the big console manufacturers are going to have paywalls there, they're looking for more value. You know, the Sony with PS Plus have been offering lots and lots of free games, and Microsoft have kind of followed suit with Gold, and they're just looking at different ways to try and get you to pay that subscription, to make that, you know, £40 a year. If they offer you enough content, maybe you'd start looking at a bit more.
I see in the US they've tied in NFL. If they were to do that in the UK with the Premier League, they would really cash in then, wouldn't they?
Yeah, if they found the money to do that, then you know they certainly would be onto a winner. But I don't know exactly what the NFL deal is in America. I know they were talking about exclusive content. You know, they weren't really specifying exactly what it was. I mean, you know, a lot of the demonstrations were showing, well, you can, you know, check your fantasy league team and things like that. You know, it was very much additional things rather than saying that we're going to offer you, you know, the kind of meat in the sandwich, so to speak.
Yeah, because in the US, NFL games, they're on network TV, and I imagine there'll be an absolute uproar in the States if they had to start paying Sony or someone like that, you know, to see their football matches on a Monday night. It's not like here where we've all been screwed over by Sky. And when Willie need to allow us to the slaughter, I think that would be a bit tougher so on the States.
Shall I put the red flag up, Steve? Call our comrades to the barricades. Ultimately, you know, I think with the football and Sky deserve each other. I say that as someone.
Yeah, no, I watched a bit of Premiership at the weekend, and I've absolutely hated it. Every second of it, I despise the Premiership. And not just because QPR got relegated last year, I've always despised the Premiership and everything it stands for and everything it's done to English football. So, yeah.
Achievement unlocked.
Interesting news story from last week, and I can't help laughing at this one. I really shouldn't laugh, being professional, but LG did a launch in South Korea, Steve, and it kind of went wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right. We shouldn't laugh. It's not really funny, but it is quite funny, to be honest. I think any kind of press launch, don't invite crowds of people with pointed, sharp sticks and BB guns because someone's going to get hurt. I don't
think they invited the people with those. I think that was improvisation.
They had vouchers on helium balloons, sort of tied on string, presumably at a certain height, and people had to come in and if they could puncture the balloon and get the voucher, they got a free LG mobile phone. So of course, people being inventive, turned up with knives on the ends of sticks and BB guns. And needless to say, 20 people got injured, and I think 7 of them were hospitalised. Obviously, LG did offer to pay for did offer to pay for their medical bills, but maybe there will be some legal bills too. Actually, come think about it. As launches go, not the best.
What I loved was the line where they said that they've called off the other events. Makes you wonder what they were doing there.
The ones with machine guns and tanks, presumably.
Oh, I'd love to
order the demilitarized zone in a minefield.
I look forward to obviously as a Korean brand. I look forward to Samsung upping the game and reintroducing the Thunderdome for the release of their next one. That'd be fantastic.
Although I suppose they did get plenty of PR, maybe not good PR, but we've all heard about it.
There's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you physically kill people.
I'd not heard of the phone beforehand, so therefore, it's worked.
Yeah, that is very true. I'd have paid to have seen that. Wrapping up this month's podcast, let's go to movie news. And Steve, what's at the cinema?
Well, actually, this week we have 2 films, both with the number 2 in the title, and both based upon graphic novels. The first of which is Kick-Ass 2. Kick-Ass 2. Not Kick-Ass. Kick-Ass 2, which is obviously a sequel to Kick-Ass, which was out back in 2010. I know, Phil, you were a big fan of the original film, weren't you?
Yeah, and then I saw the trailers for this one, and then I read Kazi's review, and I will be avoiding it.
Yeah, I loved Kick-Ass. I thought it was a great movie. It was directed by Matthew Vaughn and written by Jane Goldman, who's the wife of Jonathan Ross. It was a great film. It was based upon a comic book graphic novel by Mark Miller. And, it was satirical, it was subversive, it kind of subverted the whole superhero genre, but it was done in a very playful way. It was violent, but it was kind of violence in a comic book over the top way. It wasn't really offensive, even though it was full of violence and strong language, and you had Hit Girl using various 4-letter words. It was all done in such a way that it was genuinely fun, and you weren't actually offended by it. You just found it entertaining, and I thought it was a really great movie. Sadly, the makers of Kick-Ass 2, although Matthew Vaughn is listed as a producer, as is Jane Goldman, they weren't really involved in making this film. It is still based upon Mark Miller's second graphic novel, Kick-Ass 2, which was originally titled Kick-Ass 2 Balls to the Wall, which would have been a much better title, I think. Sadly, the filmmakers have really missed the point. They seem to feel that what was good about Kick-Ass was the swearing and the violence, whereas in actual fact, it was the subversion and the satirical humour that made it great. So this film has lots of violence. I don't agree with Kaz. Kaz seemed to think it wasn't that violent. I actually thought it was very violent in a gratuitous and nasty way, as opposed to being funny and entertaining. It was also, tonally, it was all over the place. I mean, there's a sequence where one of the characters tries to rape another character and can't get it up. And this is meant to be funny in some way. There is nothing funny about rape, and it's pretty hard to offend me. I actually found that genuinely offensive. I thought the film just had no idea what its tone was. It wanted to be serious at some points and funny at others. It just missed the mark at every opportunity. It was a very, very disappointing sequel to what I thought was actually a genuinely good film. Also, I mean, the big star of it this time around, last time obviously would have been Nicolas Cage. This time it's Jim Carrey, who is actually hardly in the film. He's in it surprisingly. He has a surprisingly little amount of screen time, considering that first of all he's one of the top billed stars, and also made a big fuss in the press before the film's released about the level of violence and how he was against it now post some of the events that have happened in the States recently. And I think maybe he was against it because it's not a very good film. But unfortunately, it's a missed opportunity, and it's a real shame because it could have been a fun movie, but they just got it completely wrong in terms of it, particularly in terms of its tone, I think. It just tried to be offensive and shock you, and instead it just became, calling the character of Chris D'Amico, who played Red Mist in Kick-Ass, tries to become a supervillain in the sequel, and so you have to use the bleep in the second film. But he calls himself the motherfucker, as if that's supposed to be in any way clever or funny. It's just stupid and slightly pathetic, really. So yeah, big disappointment with Kick-Ass 2, unfortunately.
Kaz gave it a 6 out of 10. What about you, Steve?
Being generous there, I'd have given it a 4.
Okay, cool. So moving on, Two Guns.
Two Guns, though, massive surprise here. Again, I didn't know much about the film. I knew Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington were in it. I'd seen the trailer. Unfortunately, I had seen the trailer. If you haven't seen the trailer, but you want to see this film, don't see the trailer. It's got 4 or 5 decent plot twists in the first half an hour, all of which are given away in the trailer, which really pissed me off, actually, because I really enjoyed the movie, and I wish I got into it cold, not knowing anything at all and having not seen the trailer. Again, I didn't realize it was based on a graphic novel until I was watching the credits at the end where it mentioned it, but it is apparently based on a graphic novel. It stars Denzel Washington and Mark Wahlberg. Now, Denzel Washington's always class in whatever he does, even when it's a dodgy movie. This is actually a really, really fun movie. It definitely kind of pays homage to those kind of mismatched buddy movies of the 80s and 90s. You've got a black and a white character. There's a lot of quite jokey repartee. It's very funny in places. The action scenes are really well done. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was quite surprised. I didn't expect much, to be honest. Actually found it to be a genuinely enjoyable movie. It's got a great... there's some really good plot twists in the first half an hour, especially if you haven't seen the trailer. Really do make you think, I wonder where this is going then. There's a couple of more plot twists later on in the film that are... a bit more obvious. You kind of think, okay, I think that's going to happen. But overall, it had a really good plot, great performances, quite charming. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of Mark Wahlberg, particularly if he's headlining a movie, but actually he played off Denzel Washington very well in this. Both of them are really funny. There's some really good dialogue. There's a good supporting cast. You've got Bill Paxton playing the most unlikely of CIA agents, but he's great value. Edward J. Olmos is in it too, who's really good. So good cast, great fun, really good action scenes, very funny in places. I'd actually strongly recommend Two Guns. If I was giving it a score, I'd probably give it 8 out of 10.
Now, you sure it wasn't Bill Pullman or Bill Paxton? Always get them confused.
Bill Paxton, as in Terminator, Aliens, Hudson, that kind of thing.
Not Independence Day.
Not the guy from Independence Day.
That has to be the best screen speech ever.
Well, Independence Day.
Independence Day. That is just... It's not just an American holiday. So one of the staple comedy things in the 80s, guys, was the buddy comedy, the buddy cops. We had The Heat recently, Steve, that you reviewed. Two Guns, which is a bit more serious. Are we seeing a revival of the buddy movie?
Well, we'll know it'll be a proper revival when we see a remake of Turner and Hooch, Phil.
Well, weren't there 2 of those anyway? There was also K9 with Jim Belushi and a dog.
Yeah, I know, but they both came out quite sequentially time-wise. If we saw a 21st century take on the one man and his police dog theme, we'll know that the buddy movie is...
No. What we need is a remake of the Whoopi Goldberg vehicle where she was partnered with the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Sister Act.
No, I've heard of this.
It was called Theodore Rex. It was called Theodore Rex. I kid you not. I'm not making this up. She's a cop and she's partnered with a T-Rex cop. A bloke in a suit, obviously. I don't know what they were taking when they thought that one up. But
have you actually seen it?
No, I don't think anyone. Have you seen it?
No. This is the thing. I was about to literally explode in excitement that someone had actually seen the film. I know the film exists. I've never met another human being which has apparently lived through seeing all of it. So, because I was fascinated by the premise of it. But yeah.
I'd love to see it actually, just to see how bad it actually is.
What's it called?
Theodore Rex.
Bet you it's on Amazon.
That's got to be the ultimate mismatched couple.
I'm just looking to see if it's on
time.
Netflix.
It's 1 star on IMDb.
Yeah, that's 1 star too many, I suspect.
There are no new ideas left in filmmaking.
No.
But the good news is, Steve, that I've found you a copy of Theodore Rex on DVD. If you look at the notes, I've emailed you the link. It's only going to cost you $2.27.
Bargain. Right. I'm going to buy that, watch it, and then I'll send it over to you.
Sorry, Steve. I've just noticed there's only 3 copies of Theodore Rex left in stock.
There's only 3 left in the world, hopefully. They burned all the rest.
No, Whoopi Goldberg has spent 20 years trying to buy them all up.
It's like between her and George Lucas going around trying to destroy every single copy of the Star Wars Holiday Special. And that's like his mission in life.
Which is readily.
I didn't realise it was as recent as 2003. I'd long assumed it was older.
I thought it was a 90s movie. Is it that recent?
Well, it may have been that they decided that they were waiting for a really slow month to release it on DVD. But
do you think now that Disney have got Lucasfilm, they might actually release the Star Wars Holiday Special? Have you ever seen it?
I don't think you'll ever see that. Yeah, it's readily available on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Yeah, it is without doubt one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had. It's like it must have been made on acid. That is the only explanation for that entire thing.
Well, I mean, it happened so quickly after the film, and I think they just didn't realise what they had with the film. You know,
CBS obviously were just must have been on drugs. That's the only sane explanation.
That's when you meet
what they
Chewie's
created.
family.
Well, it's like there's a bit where Chewie's dad or granddad, who's got I think called Itchy or something like that, he's watching Diane Carroll singing on a video thing, and basically it's a washing. I mean that's the only way I can describe it. I mean it's just utter. There's a bit where some guy's doing cooking, a robot with multiple arms is showing how to cook stuff. I mean it's utterly surreal. It has to be seen once, but only the once, because I don't think
does Carrie Fisher not singing it? If I remember right.
Carrie Fisher sings Life Day to the theme of Star Wars. Mark Hamill, who was obviously shot this after his accident when he went through a windscreen of his car, has got so much makeup on his face that he's got more slap on than Elizabeth Taylor at her worst. It's just unbelievable. It is an absolute car wreck, and like the best car wrecks, you can't take your eyes off it, even though
Pun intended.
Fibre of your being is screaming to turn it off.
Pun intended there, Steve. Car wreck. Hamill.
Oh God, yeah. I didn't mean. I'm sorry, Mark, if you're listening.
You
I apologise.
are on fire this evening.
But it is utterly, and I guess watching it, you realise just how bad Star Wars could have been if Lucas had made the odd wrong decision here and there. It could have utterly bollocks it up, because this is an example of just how cheesy it could have been with somebody else doing it.
Getting back to Theodore Rex, I'm just looking at this review that you've just posted, Ed. Watching this film sober and even under the influence is like giving birth out of your ear while simultaneously having a stroke, getting a root canal, walking in on your parents having sex in your bed, and that you walk in on them, you step on a rake and it hits you in the face and drives a splinter into your eye.
They had me at giving birth through my ear. I'm going to buy it.
Yet at the same time, it triggers a visceral masochistic response somewhere deep inside, and you can't help but take pleasure in every mind-numbing attempt at a joke, every sudden idiotic plot twist, and every glimpse of Whoopi Goldberg's gross ass. A real treat.
As the editor of this site, I am compelling you to go and buy that and review it now.
Apparently Whoopi Goldberg was forced to make the film in a lawsuit.
Do you think they did come up with the most ridiculous idea possible as a punishment to make you do a film? We're going to make you do the worst film in the history of the world.
Isn't that the story that there was a Fantastic Four movie made for television, and it had to be made in order to hold on to the actual franchise.
There's a name for those kind of things. I can't forget what. There's actually a special name that they give to these films that are made purely to retain the rights. They're never meant to actually be shown in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, no one told the actors that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
So these poor sods shot this film, learnt all the dialogue and everything, performed in it, but there was never any intention to release it because it was just done to retain the actual rights to the property.
In the same way that there was a Nick Fury movie starring David Hasselhoff.
No, that did get released.
That wasn't bad.
Actually, it was written by David Goyer.
Words.
It was written by David Goyer, and he doesn't know his stuff. So I mean, he obviously they had a limited budget, and they had Hasselhoff playing Nick Fury. But given what they had to work with, I actually think that David Goyer did a pretty good job on that.
Sorry, I'm still recovering from that review.
I'm going to read that. I'm deliberately not looking at it right now because otherwise I'm going to crack up.
What's weirder, the dinosaur or Whoopi Goldberg?
If he just partnered her with a guy, it would have been strange.
Yeah, or the dinosaur by itself. But there's something about the two together that almost sounds like genius.
The future's toughest cop is Katie Coltrane.
I'm back.
And now she's getting a new partner.
Hit me. It's a dinosaur.
You two solved this case together.
What? It's a dinosaur.
I love the way that we started with the best film in the world trying to talk about buddy movies, and we wound up talking about what not only possibly the worst buddy movie of all time, but very possibly one of the worst films of all time.
I don't know. We haven't seen it. Let's not judge.
Yeah,
I think it deserves a review.
We should start looking out for really, really bad films we can plug on the podcast.
Buy up all the copies, give them good reviews, and then we sit and wait.
Apparently, there is no plans for a Blu-ray release, Steve. So,
what a surprise! And there's also no plans for a sequel.
I don't know. We were talking about the implosion in Hollywood. Come 2016, where they've got no money, a man in a dinosaur suit. It's going to be, it's going to be the sort of thing they can stretch.
I still don't get the title Theodore Rex. What does that mean?
Well, now you see, I don't mean to sound like a smart ass here.
T-Rex.
Biography, or T-Rex, but it's also the biography of Theodore Roosevelt was called Theodore Rex, which is why one of the reviews on Amazon starts excellent adaptation of the Edmund Morris book, turning Edmund Morris's 500-plus page book on the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt into a 90-minute feature film with surely Herculean task, but the makes of Theodore Rex rose to the occasion.
I couldn't make a word of that, Ed, but it's still funny.
I don't think I can top that review, to be perfectly honest.
But again, that sounds brilliant. I mean, they've clearly thought it through.
I don't know about you. I take a genuine pleasure in things which are just so awful. They go out the other end and they're amazing. So yeah, I think that there's definite scope to bring this film to the attention of a wider audience.
Well, in that case, Ed, the first thing you should do after we finish this podcast is to watch the Star Wars Holiday Special on YouTube.
I watched it years and years ago, but
it has to be seen. It has to be seen just the once, just to understand how wrong something can possibly be. They didn't just miss the mark; they missed the galaxy.
I'm just sorry. Another brilliant Theodore Rex fact has just popped into view. It cost $33 million to make. Who knew the dino suits were that expensive?
And that's back when $33 million was actually quite a bit of money.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful tribute to the life and accomplishments of our 26th president. Oh dear.
Right.
I do look forward to the review of it, Steve, and don't spend too long talking about the picture.
Start a petition for a Blu-ray release. A full restoration at 4K resolution. That's what I want.
With a commentary by Whoopi Goldberg.
A commentary Whoopi Goldberg with a gun to her head. Talk about the film, Whoopi. What was your motivation in this scene then, other than the fact you had to do it?
So was it just a guy in a suit then?
Obliged.
I don't know. We need Steve to order it and watch it so that we can unpick many mysteries of this film.
See, it'd be great if it turned out that it was David Prowse.
My mum used to go out with David Prowse years ago, before I was ever.
Aren't you a little short?
I am your father.
I just love the way that he was upset that they dubbed his voice. Somehow, Dave, I don't think Darth Vader would have been quite so scary with a West Country accent. You're a part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Now take her away.
Look both ways when crossing the road.
Fastly with you, strong with you, young Skywalker, but you're not a Jedi yet, are you, my liver? I'm waiting for the MC to come back online as you stop laughing, yeah.
I've just found some photographs of Theodore Rex.
Yeah.
Is it a realistic portrayal of a T-Rex? Doesn't he wear a trench coat and a hat? And I honestly think, I'm not making that up, I think he wears like a pork pie hat or something and a trench coat. Like
it's
Ogre.
not a bad dinosaur, actually.
Like
I tell you what, it looks like. Do you remember the TV series Dinosaurs, which was like about a family of dinosaurs?
Which I don't know if you remember had the bleakest ending of anything except Alf.
What was the ending?
Oh, he screwed up at work, and they were. It was either something happened, and they all died in an ice age, and none of that is an exaggeration. They literally, in the last episode, all died in an ice age.
So at least it was realistic, though, in terms of, historical.
Well, granted, but considering it was like prime time, sort of aimed at children, I thought that was a little bit harsh. In the same way that Alf was kidnapped by the government, never given back.
Was he?
Is that how Alf ends?
Well, there was supposed to be another season where they resolved it, but as it was, he just got carted away and dissected.
It looks like a good dinosaur, though. There's a great shot here of the dinosaur giving Whoopi Goldberg a red rose. The thing is that half the images that you get back are all about Theodore Roosevelt.
Jonathan R. Betuel retired from directing after the film. Presumably, he didn't have a lot of choice.
That's the special sort of retiring where, yes, everyone encourages you to...
William Boyett's final film, presumably he died of shame. Whoopi Goldberg made a verbal agreement to star in the film in 1993. When she tried to back out, producer Richard Gilbert Abramson sued her for $20 million. The suit was settled very quickly when Goldberg agreed to star for $7 million. That's what most of the budget went then. $2 million more than the original agreement.
I don't know.
In what universe is Whoopi Goldberg worth $7 million? Back in 95. Back in 95, is that like 20
this
million?
This would have
now?
been like 60, kind of around Sister Act, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Made in America or whatever that was. She was box office. I've just seen a shot where he's in a sling at the end and he's clearly got a medal. So.
Right, okay, I think we've got enough there. I can make...
Yeah, good luck on that one, Phil.
I can make some sense out of that, I think.
You were a magician.
And that wraps up the AVForums podcast for this week. Don't forget, we are back every Wednesday with the latest news in tech, movies, and then we go off on a tangent somewhere completely different. But we will be back again next Wednesday. I'll just have to thank Mark Botwright.
This is getting better by the minute.
Steve Withers.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
And Ed Selley.
I ain't got time to bleed.
Don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter at AVForums and Facebook.com/AVForums. Why not like us? You can also bookmark AVForums.com for the latest movies, for the latest latest Theodore Rex news.
Chris will do a 10,000 word review.
Yeah, he will.
Dissertation.
Don't tempt him. He will.
Oh, you know the scope now. Latest reviews, news, video of Theodore Rex. And why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show and you made it to the end. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.